Okay, today we're going to wrap up the lesson that we started learning last week, multiplying binomials. Remember, that's 2 terms times 2 terms. Because this lesson is very brief, I'm going to start off with a quick review for those that need to kind of remember stuff. So please, again, remember my job is to help you pass. It's not to make you pass. Only you can do that. So please make sure that you're picking up on this stuff because these are all test-based questions and information. Remember that degree, we learned how to find the degree of a monomial or polynomial. Remember that mono was 1, poly was more than 1 or more, because remember a monomial is a polynomial, but this represents the general name. The degree by our definition was the number of variables attached in the term. We started out by finding the degree of a monomial or one term. So if we saw 8x squared, we learned to say these are 2 x's involved, so this degree is 2. If we were looking for the degree of this, there's 2 x's and 1 y, which gave me a degree of 3. If you look at this one, there's a -6. There are no variables involved, which means your degree is 0. And here there are 2 x's and 5 y's, which means your degree is 7. So that was how you found the degree of a monomial. We also worked with polynomials. By our definition, the degree of that was represented by the highest degree. What some of you are still doing is adding those up. Again, we do not add, we simply choose the highest degree. So you take your ability of finding the degree of a monomial and you simply put that together with your other work. So when you see a polynomial, here you say this is a degree of 5, this is a degree of 3, this is a degree of 10, right? So 5 here, 3 there, 10 there. And remember, your degree is not adding these up, it's simply looking and saying what's the highest number, and in this case the highest number is 10. And that is how you find the degree of a group of monomials. So again, you simply pick the highest number. Here the degree of this is 2 and 2, which makes 4, 3 and 2, which makes 5, 2 and 3, which makes 5. The highest number I see in this list, even though it's 2 of them, is 5. And so that is how you find the degree of a group of monomials. Again, you pick the highest number, do not add them. Another thing we see is adding polynomials. We learned that this is the same as combining like terms. We also learned that the variable portion does not change when we combine. So looking at the following problems, this is the one I'm telling you that people are going to miss because it's so confusing. This is simply saying if I have 9e to the fourth and 10 e's to the fourth, then I have 19 e's to the fourth, because 9 plus 10 is 19. Very simple question, but you have to make sure you're ready to slow down and think through that whenever you see it. The problem with B that most people have is that whenever you see it, people want to say 4u meets 5u and so on, but keep in mind this is a plus sign. This means you are adding these two things together, that you do not do distributive property with a plus sign in between them. It's only whenever they have something like this. And notice that there's nothing between them, that is where you'd have them meet. But since there is a plus, this is simply combining like terms. Also keep in mind that plus is the most harmless of signs, and so we can just combine terms the way they are. So looking at u squared, there's no other u squareds. 3u can be put together with 5u to make 8u's, and then minus 3 just comes on down. And so that is how you answer that question. Keep in mind, again, that was from 2 weeks ago, and so you still need it because that test coming up is going to have this information on it. Simplifying this, remember the trick to this was making sure you understood that this, not all these can be put together. This has three h's and 2 i's, 2 h's and 3 i's, so these are different. 3 h's and 2 i's, which means that these two match, and so 7h to the third I squared and 4h to the third I squared make 11h to the third I squared, and this one just comes on down. And so that is where we are. So again, that was your adding polynomials. We also talked about subtracting polynomials, and that was right after we learned to add. We learned that subtracting can be tricky, and it's mostly because of that negative sign. A lot of you asking me questions on your Math XL, it's because you keep overlooking the fact that this negative causes all kinds of problems in that question. Anytime you see a negative outside of a parentheses, it means change everything, and again, everything is capitalized inside the parentheses, and then after you rewrite it, you distribute. Again, looking back, we saw a question like this on B, to where we simply put it together. That's because we recognize that a plus is harmless. It would be like walking into your yard and seeing an ant on the ground. It's harmless, ignore it, just keep going where you're going. But if we walk outside and we see a big rattlesnake on the ground, you have to slow down and make sure you pay attention to it. So the negative is something you always want to slow down and pay attention to. So whenever you see this, again, this is not a distributive property because it means subtract, but the fact that it's a negative outside of a parentheses means we do need to slow down and rewrite everything. The first parentheses gets rewritten the same, and then this means switch everything on the inside. So minus 8x plus 4x squared, and then minus 6 is what we're looking at there. And now you do the addition. So 2x squared and 4x squared makes 6x squared. 5x goes together with negative 8x to make negative 3x. Again, if you don't know that, do your 5 plus negative 8, which is negative 3. And then negative 3 goes together with negative 6 to make negative 9. That is how you answer that question. So again, this is just like your addition. The difference is once you see that negative, rewrite everything without the parentheses and then go through. And the last thing we learned before we started getting into the crazy stuff was multiplying by a monomial. Next we looked at how to multiply by a monomial by a polynomial. This was described to you as a distributive property on steroids, as long as we remembered the 3 key steps. And again, some of you are just breezing right through these 3 steps, and others of you are not paying attention to it. It's kind of like the same 3 steps we did in the chapter 7. But the first thing you want to do is figure out what the sign is by looking. If there's one negative, it's negative. If there are 2 negatives, then it's positive. If there are no negatives, then it's positive. So that's the first thing we do, is we determine the sign. We then multiply the actual numbers. So whatever numbers are there, we multiply them and bring them down. If there's no number, that means that no number comes down. If there is one number, then that means that number comes down. And remember, again, you only add the exponents whenever we are multiplying. And so that is what we do next. So outside of multiplying carefully, this was not much of a challenge for you. And again, I'm not going to list the meetings because you should know how to do that. These two are opposites. There's one negative there, so it's going to be negative. My number is just 3. And there's 3 and 2, which make 5 G's. Then you have these two meet. And again, you look and say, this is negative, that is negative, which means it's going to be a positive. The number in these two is going to be a 4. And there's 3 here, 1 there, so it's G to the 4th. This is where a lot of you messed up on your quiz, but again, it's 3 G's here, 1 G there, which makes 4 altogether. You've got to make sure you slow down and do all 3 of these steps. Find your sign, multiply the numbers, add the exponents. It feels like it takes forever, but the more you do it, the faster it just becomes a natural instinct, and you don't have to rush through it. Think about tying your shoe when you were young. When you first tied your shoe, I'm sure we had many different things about bunny ears and all this stuff, and while we were tying, we had to do a whole bunch of thinking. And then I want you to think about how you tie your shoes now. It just became a natural process. You still do all the processes. It's just a natural part of the way you do it. Same thing with this. If you continue to think through these 3 steps every single time, you're going to simply get faster at going through them, which is why you end up getting better at it. You don't want to start out trying to take shortcuts. Just go through those 3 steps, which I even go through all the time. These two meet. My sign is positive. 5 times 6 is 30. There's 1 and 2 here, so it's T to the 3rd. Positive and negative. Again, the sign first, which means that it's negative. 5 times 5 is 25. 1T makes 2 T's. Here, positive and negative, which means the sign is negative. 5 times 4 makes 20. 1T, no T's, which means that 2 or 1T is what comes down. And so that was the step on that. As long as you start taking your time, I think that you will start doing better on that also. And then multiplying binomials. The last multiplication that we learned was multiplying binomials. We learned to visualize it as 2 people meeting, and we learned to view it as people shaking hands. Again, I'm not going to list those things out because I think we've done that a lot. If you are listing them, go ahead for your notes. Remember, you can always pause this and move at your own pace, but my job is to get you more adapted to moving the way you need to. And at some point, you do want to do this without listing x meets 4x, x meets 6, negative 7 meets 4x, negative 7 meets 6. You just want to use that connection line to kind of guide your eyes. This is going to be a positive. The number is 4. There's x here, x there, which means it's x squared. So this is how you want to be working those. Again, draw your connection and let that guide your eyes. Positive and positive is why it's positive. The number is 4, 2 x's. Now ignore that one and move to these two. Positive because they're both positive. The only number involved is 6, and there is only 1 x there. Here, when you look at these two, it's a negative and a positive, which means it's negative. the number is going to be 28 with an x. And then when you look at these, again, the signs are different, so it's negative. 7 times 6 is 42. There's no variables, and there's that part. And again, the last thing we have to make sure we do is combine our like terms. 4x squared comes down. 6 and negative 28 make negative 22x. And then minus 42 comes down. And you're done. Okay. And then the last thing, review-wise, was something like this. Again, looking at these two. Positive 10, 2x's. Here, signs are different, so negative 15 with 1x. Here, signs are different, so negative 2 times 2 is 4 with 1x. Here, both negative, so it's a positive 6, no x's. So again, the more you do your sign, number, count the variables, the faster you get. Put your like terms together now. 10x squared minus 19x plus 6, and there you go. Today what we're going to do is look at a small adjustment that the unit expects for us to understand. Look at the following problems before we move on to the end. And again, this is a very quick adjustment. It just gets back into things that we know. For example, we know that 2 to the third means we want 2 times 2 times 2. Remember doing that a long time ago, that this exponent means do it that many times. Well, this is the trick. The squared is simply telling you that you want to take this thing times itself twice. So when you see something like this that says simplify this squared, it means write it by itself twice. Now it becomes a simple question. 2x times 2x is 4x squared. 2x times 3 is 6x. 3 times 2x is 6x. 3 times 3 is 9. From there, these two go together. 4x squared, 12x, 9. And now you understand with the ease of how we got through that why I said today was a very brief lesson, because it really didn't take much for me to show you that all you have to do is remember that this squared means write it twice. If that was a 3, then I would put this 3 times. And there's a way to do that, but again, we're not ready for that just yet. So for right now, you are learning how to deal with the second power of it, but eventually there is a way to do a third power. And again, you'll see a question like this on your assessment this week. You'll see simplify 4x minus 9 squared. Again, this squared means write it twice. Use your math training. Once you have that, again, this is 16x squared minus, because the signs are different, 36x. Minus, again, the signs are different, 36x, and then plus, because they're both negative, that's where people usually miss it, plus 81. These two things, because they're both negative, go together to make negative 72x, and then plus 81. So again, that is all that is new today. Everything else that we did hopefully brought some things back to your memory. Be sure to continue practicing this information. The test is only 1 week away, and it's time to begin memorizing some of these processes. What does it mean that the test is 1 week away? It means that if for some reason you keep telling me you're forgetting it, that I have no sympathy for you, because you now have more than 7 days, actually you're up to about 10 days or so, that you can start studying and doing things. I know there's no homework in this class, but the homework is to study. It's to take the worksheets that I give you, and just even if you look at what you did, or even if you work out a couple of questions, that is your job. So make sure you are trying to remember this stuff. Otherwise, as I said, if you fail it, there's nothing I can do for you, because in the end, the argument is going to be that we moved at a pace that was very, very not easy, but it wasn't stressful, and that you had time to learn things, and that you still could not show me you learned them. And if you don't learn them, I do have to give you an F. So again, start focusing on your studying, start learning to kind of do some things that you're weak at. Also, if you need to go back to your Math Excel and do those, please do that too after you do your couple of new questions today. And again, start making better decisions for yourself, so we can get ready to get a good grade in this chapter or in this quarter and get you ready to pass this class. Good luck.